I am an addict in recovery, a journey that began when I was already an independent adult. It's a path that took its grip on me despite the facade of control I thought I had over my life. Those days were filled with chaos and unmanageability, casting long shadows over my existence. But here's the thing, as turbulent as those days were, I never resorted to actions that would directly tarnish my family's trust in me. Despite my spiraling downward into the cave of addiction, I avoided the pitfall of stealing from my own family or damaging their property. I did not physically hurt them, nor did I bring harm onto them in any other tangible way. Still, the emotional turmoil I inflicted on them was significant and, unquestionably, something not to be taken lightly. The weight of emotional stress and trauma weighed heavily on their hearts as they watched me drift deeper into my addiction. Yet, my parents held a steadfast belief, one that was both comforting and emotionally taxing. They insisted that any worries and stresses in their lives were not burdens meant for their children to bear. My brother, for example, remained untouched by the harsh reality of my struggles. Hidden behind this wall of whispered conversations and silent glances, he was shielded from the chaos that was brewing just out of his sight. In their perspective, protecting him from the knowledge of my condition and allowing him to grow in a home seemingly untouched by my issues was quintessential. When my presence became too much of a looming number, my brother was instead offered fragments of my narrative, handpicked to prevent his vision from colliding with the messy truths of my experimentation. For my parents, lack of trust wasn't necessarily aimed directly at me, nor was it at the disease of addiction itself, but rather at the uncertainty of who I could become if addiction ever took its powerful grip on me again. They used this unease, this credible panic at the fleeting moments of potential relapse as a canvas upon which my brother could do what he willed, free from confronting the shattered parts of the past. Even through the darkness of addiction, the tangled web of unresolved issues and emotional distance remained. Yet, I clung to the hope that my dedication to recovery would be a bridge, bringing us all to a point where open conversation could thrive. I longed for my parents, and indeed my family as a whole, to understand that their caution, although well-intentioned, could also stoke the embers of misunderstanding between my brother and me. Trying to find my footing in a life promising healing and renewal, I stood at the crossroads of forgiveness and fractured family dynamics. Recovery was teaching me that healing is never linear, and the burden of past actions, even when unintentional, isn't so easily discarded. As I threaded my way through this journey, trying to reconcile the past with the future, I found that every step was both a confrontation and a revelation, demonstrating the intricate and sometimes uneasy dance we all must learn in the realm of recovery. In a gesture meant to bridge the distance and provide some kind of familial support, I gifted my brother my car when I made the decision to start afresh in a new city in Canada. It was a tangible connection between us, a symbol of trust and goodwill, made even more significant by the history of the car. It wasn't just a vehicle. It was a part of my journey, an emblem of independence, freedom, and once upon a time, solace. The only stipulation was that should he decide he no longer wanted or needed the car, he would give me the opportunity to reclaim it. But, in a surprising twist of events that cast shadows on the already frail foundations of trust, I discovered a few months back that my brother had arranged, through my father's facilitation, to sell the car. When I heard this, I felt a sharp jolt of betrayal. I would have gladly taken it back had I known, retaining that meaningful piece of my past to which I had still clung. Instead, what I sensed was a blatant disregard for my wishes. Or worse, a misunderstanding wrapped in the illusion of familial support. The news struck a nerve deep within me. It wasn't about the monetary value or the pragmatic asset that the car was, but the growing realization that my intentions and sentiments were disregarded. Even more disappointing was the way my parents tried to rationalize the situation, emphasizing the financial gesture of sharing the proceeds from the sale, as opposed to acknowledging the emotional weight the car carried for me. They defended my brother, reiterating that since I had gifted the car, it was his to do with as he pleased. Yet, what stung the most was the lack of communication, the absence of a simple conversation that could have prevented this misunderstanding. Listening to my father's reasoning only added to my frustration. It seemed like a pattern was emerging. Major decisions affecting me were surfaced indirectly, leaving little room for my input or feelings. Despite their arguments, I couldn't help but feel that my brother, shielded from my turbulent past and my specific requests, was somehow leveraging these gaps to his advantage. It certainly felt like a misuse of the very trust I had tried to rebuild, underlying my precarious position in the family dynamic, where my voice often became a whisper against a backdrop of misunderstanding. I had always tried to be the big sister who offered without expectation, who gave love despite the tensions of our shared experiences. But this incident pulled back the curtain on deeper issues, exposing the fragile loyalties that teetered on the cusp of disintegration. I swallowed back the bitterness, realizing that perhaps it wasn't just a car or a childhood misunderstanding at stake, but a symptom of larger unresolved family dynamics that lay beneath the surface, waiting to be confronted. I was preparing to address these festering feelings directly with my brother, hoping for at least some sort of resolution or understanding. But just as I was gathering my strength for this inevitable conversation, life threw me yet another curveball. My partner, who like me, had bravely battled against the chains of addiction, suddenly fell terribly ill once more. His condition deteriorated rapidly, the addiction's cruel grip bringing out the most unpredictable and uncontrollable sides of him. I stood by him, doing everything within my human capabilities to support and comfort him, to shield him from the demons of his relapse. But as days melted into nights, no prayers or actions seemed sufficient against the relentless assault on his fragile being. Addiction is a cruel master, and despite the desperate love and care I offered, his body could no longer endure the weight of his past and present struggles. On April 6th, he succumbed, not just to the relapse, but to the cumulative exhaustion of a relentless fight. The shadow of his passing cast a deep, unsettling silence over my life. My brother knew of my partner. They had met, exchanged pleasantries, shared moments however fleeting. Yet, in what was perhaps the most inexplicable of all disappointments, I did not receive even the briefest text or call from my brother. Not a single message to acknowledge my loss, nor a word of solace to lessen the gravity of my grief. I was left bewildered, trying to make sense of this silence. How could someone so close, someone who, at least during our shared moments, seemed understanding, disregard such a significant loss in my life? It felt like a quiet betrayal, more resounding than the clash over my car. A simple acknowledgement wouldn't have erased my heartbreak, but it would have meant a great deal. As days passed, my unresolved frustration with my brother and my overwhelming sorrow entwined, making things heavier to carry. Every interaction with my family became etched with underlying tension, an unspoken script of what-ifs and whys dictating our every conversation. It made me question not only our connection, but the lack of empathy within the family that seemed to ignore the void left by my partner's untimely departure. Despite the myriad of emotions swirling within me, there lay some semblance of peace in knowing that for my beloved partner, the struggles had finally ceased. It was a small comfort amidst the chaos of grief, a lesson reminding me of the brutal finality that addiction often ushers. Yet, my brother's silence remained like an unresolved chord, echoing through the spaces where understanding should have bridged our differences. In the shadows of these moments, I found myself reflecting more on my place within my family, seeking clarity in these murky waters of confusion and sorrow, yearning for the day when conversations would be meaningful and compassion would be mutual. Until then, I find solace in my recovery journey, hoping it brings me closer to the answers I need, even as I ponder those never-received words from my brother. Today, as I sat across from my parents at a small cafe, we were enveloped by the kind of quiet tension that seems to whisper instead of shout. It was alien to have this involuntary dance around the wreckage, a contrast from the genuine warmth I had often felt with them. My father cleared his throat, breaking the silence with news that once might have been mundane, but now felt laden with misplaced importance. "Your brother was asking if he could borrow the truck tent," he said casually, as if mentioning a change in the weather. In that moment, it was hard for me to believe that life could just string along with frivolous requests when so much felt broken inside. It was like hearing a request to borrow a book while my library was ablaze. The tent, an accessory for adventure and the semblance of getaway, seemed strangely symbolic at this moment. Freedom, escape, solace. I was stunned, not by the request itself, but by its timing, or perhaps its mistiming. How was it that amidst everything, a tent had become his point of interest? How was it not the shared legacy of pain or loss or even a simple check-in? The tent wasn't important. What it represented was. It stood as a symbol that our familial connection was overshadowed by material need. It felt like a reminder that our priorities were off-kilter, a dynamic possibly skewed by my past mistakes and current heartaches. What am I missing here? I finally found my voice to question out loud, a query still directed inward. I didn't know if I was asking about clarity in my brother's intentions or a larger reflection on our family's emotional landscape. My parents exchanged a look, an exchange of silent words that skipped over me like an emotional stealth. "I know you both love each other in your own ways," my mother said, hopeful or perhaps resigned. Their responses didn't answer my question, but rather underscored the invisible dividers we wove around familial expectations and individual needs. In the reality of losing my partner, with the crushing weight of absence as my daily reminder, my brother's silence screamed the loudest. His request, funneled through my parents like a meandering echo, highlighted the stark distance between our experiences. The tent, the car, my brother's silence, they all felt like markers on a path I was trudging alone, occasionally intersected by brief company. Each marker a testament to missteps made, love sought and sometimes withheld. Maybe borrowing the tent meant nothing more to him than a practical solution to an immediate need. Perhaps, in another life, his silence would have held no meaning, just as a tent is simply fabric, or a car just metal. But here, now, in this life constantly at odds with chaos and past demons, these things held more weight. As my parents and I moved on in conversation, leaving the topic behind like a shadow tethered to the past, I resolved to address the complex layers of our relationships when the time was right. For now, the path forward in my recovery demanded its due vigil, accompanied by hope for understanding sprouting from seeds of discord. And maybe, just maybe, in time, words from my brother would fill the vacant spaces in our connection, not merely through objects, but through a shared emotional tapestry yet to be woven.